The screaming started at 8:17 a.m. sharp. That was the moment Carla Whitmore realized her spotless white Mercedes was being dragged off her driveway by a tow truck, while half the neighborhood filmed her meltdown. What she didn't know was that 3 hours earlier she had taken a crowbar to my brand new Camaro. And what she really didn't know was that I already had the evidence that would burn her whole HOA empire to the ground. Before I tell you how everything exploded that morning, let me back up. My name is Marcus Hayes, and 6 months ago, I moved into Cedar Grove Estates, a suburban Dallas neighborhood that looked peaceful on the outside but rotted like old fruit underneath. I was 52, working as an electrician, newly divorced after the worst year of my life. My ex-wife got the house, the dog, and half my retirement. I got a small ranch home, a quiet street, and a shot at rebuilding my life. The first thing I did after the divorce was buy the one thing I dreamed of since I was a teenager. A 2024 Camaro SS in fire red, the kind of car that turns heads and wakes something up inside you. The fresh leather smell mixed with the Texas heat the day I drove it home, and for the first time in months I felt alive again. The V8 rumble felt like hope. That hope lasted 3 days. On day 4, I met Carla. If you took every stereotype of a power-drunk suburban Karen and wrapped it in designer clothes, pearls, and a haircut that never moved in the wind, you'd get her. She had been HOA president of Cedar Grove for 6 years, and people said she ran the place the same way a drill sergeant runs a boot camp. Her house sat at the end of the cul-de-sac, biggest lawn, biggest windows, biggest attitude. A perfect little kingdom for a woman who loved rules more than people. And she came after me immediately. My first violation, my mailbox was the wrong color. She said black, disrupted neighborhood harmony. Replacing it cost me $89 for the exact same box in approved cedar brown. The note she taped to my door smelled like her perfume, some expensive floral scent that clung to paper like a threat. After that, the fines hit like clockwork. Grass 1 inch too tall. Oil stain on the driveway. Garden hose not rolled tightly enough. Every time I stepped outside, I felt her cold blue eyes on me, watching from her kitchen like a hawk waiting for prey to slip. But then she came for my Camaro. At my first HOA meeting held in a stuffy community room that smelled like stale coffee and floor cleaner, she pointed a finger at me like she was calling out a criminal. 4 board members sat beside her, silent, nodding like bobbleheads. "Sports cars," she said in that sharp, clipped voice, "project an undesirable image for our community." She slid a $200 fine across the folding table like she was dealing cards in a poker game. The fluorescent lights above flickered, humming in the silence. I felt the heat rising in my chest, but I kept my voice level. "I'm parked in my own driveway." She smiled the way snakes do. "Some people don't understand rules, Marcus." Quote. There was something in her tone, something ugly, something personal, that told me this wasn't about a car, it was about control. That night, while the neighborhood slept, I sat at my kitchen table reading through every page of our HOA rules. I traced my finger over each line under the warm yellow glow of the stove light, and my stomach tightened. Carla was making up half the violations she'd given me. She wasn't enforcing rules, she was inventing them. The next week it happened. I walked out into the cool morning air and froze. My Camaro, my pride, my last joy was ruined. Deep scratches carved through the paint. Glass shattered across the concrete like ice. Metal peeled back in long, violent lines. The smell of gasoline and broken dreams hung in the air, mixing with the sweet scent of honeysuckle from my neighbor's fence. My hands shook as I touched the damaged door, the metal still cold from the night. The police came. They shrugged. No witnesses, no cameras. The officer said, writing slowly like he was bored. Probably kids. Quote, "But when I stepped back into my house, my phone buzzed. It was my neighbor, Mrs. Hensley, 73, sharp as a tack, living alone since her husband passed. Her house always smelled like cookies and lavender, and she kept binoculars by her window just to keep an eye on things." She texted one line, I saw who did it. Please come over. Her living room smelled like lavender and old paper. She closed her curtains, hands trembling. It wasn't kids, she whispered. It was Carla's son. Midnight. Metal tool in his hand. I saw everything. My chest tightened. Will you tell the police? She shook her head, fear tightening her voice. She'll destroy me, Marcus. She always destroys people who speak up. That was the moment everything clicked. Carla didn't just enforce rules, she hunted people. She used fines, threats, bogus violations. Anything to scare folks into silence or out of the neighborhood. But unlike the people she'd scared off before, she hadn't counted on me, because while she thought she was destroying me, I was already planning something she could never see coming. And the next piece of evidence, the one that would flip this whole war upside down, was about to be caught on camera. The night my cameras caught her, the world felt both small and enormous. I lay in bed staring at my phone as the motion alert lit the screen. My thumb trembled when I tapped the footage. There she was, under the pale street light, crouched beside my Camaro like someone who wanted to carve a message into my life. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. She worked with a landscaping edger from the community shed, the blade whining a high metallic note that sounded like nails on a chalkboard. In the infrared glow, her ring flashed as she smiled while she carved the paint. She paused and listened, then went back to work. Pure, ugly pleasure spread across her face like a mask. I could have run out there. I could have grabbed her by that perfect blonde bob. But my lawyer's voice lived in my head. Keep your head, he said. Document everything. Let them hang themselves. So I did. Martha, Mrs. Hensley, was at my door before dawn. She hovered on the porch in her cardigan, a paper bag of fresh biscuits under one arm. Her eyes were wide like a woman who had slept badly for years. The lavender smell from her house followed her onto my stoop, sharp and slow. She'll come out at the same time every morning, she mouthed without a full sentence. She walks the route, checks on the lawns, makes sure no one's stepping out of line. We sat at my kitchen table with coffee gone cold and the dim glow of my laptop lighting our faces. I played the footage again and again. Each time it hurt less like a pulse and more like a contract being signed against her. I made copies, downloaded the clips to 3 different cloud accounts and burned 2 USBs. One went into my glove compartment. One went into Martha's biscuit box. Paper copies of timestamps and camera logs filled my workbench like plans for a small war. The next person who mattered was Edgar Williams. He had been the HOA treasurer before he got run off. I met him at a diner 2 towns over, where the coffee felt honest and cheap. Edgar's hands shook when he set a manila folder on the table. The diner's fluorescent lights buzzed while the waitress wiped down the counter and pretended not to listen. It started small, Edgar said, voice rough like a man who had been sleeping on worry. He pushed a sheaf of bank statements toward me. Invoices for landscaping, for porta potties, for security services. Payments went out monthly, check numbers, dates. But the vendors? They did not exist. He pointed to a line and pushed a pen through the paper. This company was set up under Bethany Morrison, that's her maiden name. Same address as her house. The check's clear. The money disappears into accounts with names that mean nothing. We asked questions. She fined us for asking. I tasted metal when I read the figures. Money shifted around like a curtain hiding a stage. 60,000, 75,000. The numbers swam. Edgar's folder smelled like stale paper in relief. We left the diner with more than coffee. He handed me contact numbers for contractors who had been asked to sign fake receipts. One contractor agreed to meet me the next day. Another sent photos of work he never did. There were emails, there were dates. There was a pattern like a map someone had drawn with care. That night I turned my garage into a command center. I hung Edgar's bank statements on pegboard with pushpins. Rico's towing invoices were stacked on the workbench under the desk lamp. My laptop screens showed cloud files syncing. The dashcam footage played on one monitor. My toolbox sat nearby like a soldier's kit. the smell of motor oil mixed with printer toner and cheap coffee until the room felt holy. Rico called about midnight. He runs the only honest towing company in 3 counties. I had him on the hook because he knows how towing law works. I told him what I'd seen. He didn't say much, just the sort of professional grunt that means, "I'm in." "Get your ducks in a row," he said. "If she's been taking money and not paying services, that creates liens. I'll pull invoices tomorrow. If the HOA doesn't pay, I can legally impound vehicles for unpaid fees. That Mercedes of hers? If there's a lien, it's fair game." Hearing Rico, I felt the outline of a plan shape up. Not violence, not revenge for revenge's sake. Tight legal moves, paperwork, witnesses, cameras that leave no room for her spin. We built a list of witnesses. Martha for the midnight sighting, Edgar for the bank records, the contractor who never got paid for a landscaping job that had never happened, neighbors who had been fined for tiny things because they dared to ask questions. 15 families volunteered to support an audit if we took this public. I called my divorce lawyer. I didn't want him in my ear telling me to back down. I wanted him to point me at the legal paths. He sent me a short list of steps and told me to get everything duplicated, notarized, and time-stamped. He said to expect resistance, to expect smear campaigns, to expect her to try to turn the town against me. He also said he could introduce me to a federal contact if the evidence was strong enough. Sarah Kim was the lawyer he recommended. She specialized in HOA corruption and had teeth. She told me once she saw Edgar's files, she wanted to represent us. Her voice was a razor. "This isn't a parking dispute," she said. "This is fraud, embezzlement, mail fraud. We go big." A reporter from Channel 8's investigative team reached out 2 mornings later. Her name was Lisa Martinez. She wanted to meet, to hear our story. She had a reputation for sticking to the facts and making them sting. I showed her the footage. She watched in silence, the room thick like syrup. Then she asked one question. "Do you want to go public?" "Yes," I said without thinking. "If it puts her where she belongs." We began to line things up. Sarah started drafting a complaint. Lisa planned a feature. Rico prepared his trucks with all the proper paperwork, tow manifests, and signed invoices. Edgar prepared a forensic packet to hand to prosecutors. I made sure every camera had a backup and that timestamps matched bank records. Each step felt surgical and right. On the second night after the footage, I lay awake listening to the house settle and the neighbor's HVAC hum like distant thunder. My phone buzzed at 2 in the morning. It was motion alerts again from the driveway camera. I pulled the video with the same hollow feeling I had the first time. She was there again, methodical, serene, a woman who treated destruction like a hobby. I set 3 alarms for 6 a.m. and went to bed with my hands folded like a man who had finally found a reason to pray. Dawn came brittle and bright. The smell of burning leaves rode the wind. From my porch I could see Rico's tow truck idling like a great beast on the street, its engine a low rumble that vibrated in my chest. Neighbors were streaming out in slippers and robes, phones already pointed, breath clouding in the cool air. Across the cul-de-sac, Carla stepped out onto her front steps in a robe that cost more than some people's rent. She stopped, saw the truck, and her face changed. For a second she looked like a woman who had slept through a storm and woken in its eye. She reached for her phone with hands that shook. My heart pounded against my ribs like a man running. Cameras recorded every movement. Edgar stood near the curb with his folder. Martha clutched a paper bag of biscuits like a banner. Then something hard and cold clicked in my chest as I realized this morning was either going to be the end of her or the end of everything we'd risked. She started to stride down the walk toward Rico like a general coming to parley. I tightened my grip on the railing and watched the whole neighborhood hold its breath. Carla hit the sidewalk like a storm wrapped in designer fabric. Her heels snapped against the concrete, sharp and fast, the way people walk when they still think they're in control. Her perfect blonde bob didn't move an inch. Her jaw was tight. The sunrise lit her face just enough to show the panic behind her eyes. She marched right up to Rico's tow truck and slapped the door with her palm. "You need to move this truck," she snapped, her voice slicing through the morning air. "This is private property, and you are trespassing." Quote. Neighbors gathered behind her, whispers rising like heat. Phones were out, cameras blinked. Even the school bus slowing at the corner seemed to pause to watch. Rico stepped out of the cab with the calm of a man who'd done this 1,000 times. He wiped his hands on a rag and adjusted his coveralls. "Ma'am," he said, steady as stone, "I'm parked legally on a public street, and I'm here to collect payment for 18 months of unpaid invoices. A total of $3,800. Carla blinked like she'd been slapped. "That's impossible," she said, turning red. "Our treasurer handles payments. There must be some confusion." Rico pulled out a folder thick enough to smother a fire. "No confusion," he said. "Every one of these invoices has your signature." You could feel the shift in the air. Neighbors leaned closer. Someone gasped. A dog barked once, then stopped, as if even it sensed something big was happening. Officer Rodriguez's patrol car rolled up the street right then, tires crunching over fallen leaves. He stepped out with a tight sigh, the kind of sigh a man gives when he already knows he's walking into trouble. "Morning," he said. "Got a call about harassment." Carla spun toward him like she'd been waiting for her hero. "Officer," she said, voice trembling dramatically, "this man is harassing me and blocking access to my home. He's threatening violence. I'm terrified." It was the most polished lie I'd ever seen. Rodriguez raised a brow. "Threatening violence?" I stepped forward, calm as ice. "Officer," I said, "we're dealing with unpaid tow fees and evidence of financial misconduct. And while we're here," I handed him the printed video stills, "here's footage from 2 nights ago of her vandalizing my car." Rodriguez stared at the images, his jaw tightening. Carla's face drained color so fast it looked like someone pulled a plug inside her. Before she could speak, Martha shuffled forward, clutching her envelope of documents. "Officer," she said, her voice shaking but strong, "we have more." Quote. Behind her came a small army of neighbors: Edgar, Helen, James, young families pushing strollers, retirees with folders under their arms. People Carla had crushed over the years. People who used to tremble when she walked by. Today, they looked ready to testify before the Supreme Court. Rodriguez took the packet, flipping through pages. His shoulders stiffened with each sheet. Bank transfers, fake invoices, fraudulent insurance reports, repeated harassment patterns. He looked up slowly, eyes locking on Carla. "This is serious," he said. "Very serious." Carla let out a dry laugh, the kind people make when their world starts slipping. "This is all fabricated," she shouted, voice cracking. "These are disgruntled neighbors creating a smear campaign." But the street suddenly erupted with voices. "You canceled my insurance. You fined me for a garden gnome. You forged my signature. You stole from us. You scared us into moving." Her own kingdom was rising up against her. And then, the moment that cracked everything open, Channel 8's news van turned the corner. Lisa Martinez stepped out with her camera crew, her microphone already clipped on. The air tightened like a drum. Carla's eyes widened with real fear this time. "Mrs. Whitmore," Lisa called out, "would you like to comment on allegations of embezzlement, harassment, and vandalism?" Carla stumbled back. "No comment," she shrieked. "I'm calling the mayor." She grabbed her phone and turned away, pacing fast, but we all heard the voice on the other end. The mayor's office gave her the coldest political dismissal imaginable. "We cannot interfere in HOA matters." Her face fell like someone cut the strings holding it up. Lisa's cameras rolled. That's when Rico moved. He stepped around the truck, holding a clipboard. "Ma'am," he said loud enough for the whole block to hear, "your vehicle is subject to immediate impoundment due to unpaid liens. Please step back." "No!" Carla screamed, but her voice cracked like thin glass. The tow truck's hook clanked down. Chains slapped metal. The hydraulics hissed, loud and final, like a judge slamming a gavel. Carla lunged forward, but neighbors held her back. She let out a noise halfway between a scream and a sob as her precious white Mercedes, the car she polished twice a week, lifted into the air in front of cameras and 60 witnesses. It was justice in motion. And it wasn't even the end. Unmarked sedans rolled in next. Federal agents stepped out. The neighborhood went dead silent except for the cicadas humming in the distance and the clicking cameras. An agent approached her porch. Carla Ann Whitmore. He said, "You're under arrest for embezzlement, mail fraud, insurance fraud, and racketeering." Her knees buckled. Her perfect life shattered in a single morning. They cuffed her, walked her past the crowd, past the neighbors she terrorized, past the Mercedes swinging on the tow hook like a trophy, past the cameras documenting every second of her downfall. People clapped, cheered, some cried. And for the first time since moving to Cedar Grove, I heard laughter on our street. 6 months later, everything changed. Carla was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $127,000 in restitution. Our neighborhood is peaceful again. Kids ride bikes without parents watching the sidewalks. The new HOA board is transparent and fair. Edgar is treasurer. Martha runs a community garden. Rico tows cars legally for actual violations instead of fake ones. And my Camaro, fully repaired, better than new. Now when I sit in my driveway and hear the rumble of that V8, it doesn't remind me of the worst days, only the day a neighborhood found its spine. And the day justice finally took out the trash.